Hi, this is Ben Cotton, the founder of CyFIR. CyFIR is the premier enterprise forensics platform that enables a forensics-first approach to cybersecurity and enterprise forensics investigations. This approach enables cyber professionals to see more so they can know more through the complete visibility on an endpoint, enabling them to make real-time decisions on sound forensics data. This visibility is enterprise-wide and encompasses live memory, live endpoint forensics, enterprise keyword searching in minutes, and endpoint access down to even the unallocated space on a remote hard drive. Today, we are going to talk about creating users, roles, groups, and permissions. We covered the initial logon procedures in a previous video. So we are going to go ahead and we're going to log into our instance here. I'm going to supply the username. I'm supplying the passwords. You see that we have the proxy host and we have the port that you configured your proxy server to receive data from. If you recall, we created that first case in the previous video, so we're going to simply click on that and we're going to go into that first case. So when you're creating users and roles and permissions, you can start from any one of those three positions. It is my best practice to start with defining roles. So let's go ahead and we're going to highlight the role label. We're going to right click and we're going to add. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to add a tier 3 role here. Okay, so this is all investigative permissions. Now, we don't have any other users created yet, so we're not going to apply this to anyone at this point. But let's look at the permissions real quickly as we go down through this. Now, it's important to understand that you've got server-side permissions, you've got user permissions, and you've got agent permissions. As we walk through this, you will see those permissions labels. When you click on a particular permission, you will see over here in the description box that it will outline what this does. You'll also notice that as we've created a new role, we will not have any permissions assigned to that role. So CyFIR takes an implicit must permit approach to users, roles, and permissions. So for this particular user, since we said this is a tier 3 and we're going to apply all permissions that are available under CyFIR to that role, I'm going to simply click up here on this top bar here, and I'm going to highlight all of those permissions. But as we walk through here on the server side of things, we have security, we have monitoring, we have the ability to clean up the CyFIR database and to delete agents. We have our reporting functions, we have our statistical analysis features, and we also have the ability to install and uninstall agents. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add those functions to the roles. Okay, and so if you look, we now have, as part of our users and roles tiers here, we now have a tier 3. Let's go ahead and add another one, and I'm going to create this as a tier 2. And we're going to go to the permissions, and we're going to add security, we're going to add monitoring, we're going to add server cleanup and database cleanup, but we're not going to give him the ability to delete those agents. We're going to give him a full reporting ability. We're going to give this role a full access to the statistics, and we are not going to allow him to install an agent, but we are going to allow them to update an agent. and we're going to click Add. Okay, so at this point in time, let's actually create a couple more users. So I'm going to create a user for myself, Ben Cotton, and I'm going to simply right-click on users, add the user. We'll put in a descriptive name here. We'll add a username or login name, and then we'll type in a password. We'll confirm that password, and we're done with this pane. Now let's go over here to roles. So I'm going to assign the Tier 3 role to myself. Okay, you'll see that on this piece, I can also add individual user roles, which I tend not to do in an enterprise environment. Let's let the roles function serve as those permissions that allows you to inherit those permissions and apply those roles to specific groups, and it makes it a much more flexible function. And so we're just going to go ahead and add that. I'm going to add another role here, and I'm going to call this one John Doe. And it'd be john.doe and a password. I'm going to give it the Tier 2 role. Okay. So now we've created 2 users, we've created 2 roles, and let's create some groups for our environment. Now, groups can be used in a number of ways. I always recommend that you have at least one group that is every agent in the environment. So that gives you a complete overview of your environment. All the endpoints that you've installed CyFIR on are reporting back into that group. That allows you to do enterprise level searches with about 3 clicks of a mouse button, and we'll show you that in a subsequent video. But let's go ahead and create that agent group for the entire environment. So I'm going to go ahead and add a group, and now I'm going to go ahead and call this enterprise. And I'm going to add all the agents that are in the environment to this group. So you'll notice, once again, very much like when we added the case, if you have something highlighted and you click the right arrow, that single instance will now be moved over into our action pane here on the right. So I'm going to click the double arrow and simply add all the agents to this function here. And now that I've got everything in our action pane to the right, I'm going to look at the permissions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a role. So I'm going to add the Tier 2 role to this, and I'm going to also add the Tier 3 role to this. So with this is where we get into the agent function pieces of the permissions. And you'll notice that we now have an additional set of permissions here at this level. So from a Tier 2 perspective, once again, I'm going to highlight this acquisition. If you don't know what something is, highlight it, and in the right-hand pane here, it gives you a descriptive verbiage of what that function does. So this allows for an agent to be acquired, both physical memory and the hard drive as well. So I think that's important for a Tier 2 guy. Will we allow them to browse the file system? Okay, I think that's important for a Tier 2 guy. Are we going to allow this person to search across the entire enterprise for images that may or may not be pornographic? We're going to go ahead and allow that. This mount disk function is very interesting. This allows an analyst to mount a remote hard drive as if it were a physical drive on the local investigative workstation. So if you've got your forensics tool of choice, this allows you to do that. So we're going to allow him to do that. Matter of fact, we're going to allow everything except for this remote console for our Tier 2 guy. And for a Tier 3 guy, we're going to allow everything. And if you look at the remote console here, this allows you to actually drop down to a system level command prompt on any CyFIR enabled endpoint and allow you to run command lines from a remediative or a further investigative standpoint. You can also kick off additional tool sets like you can push a PCAP capture routine down to the endpoint, do packet captures from that endpoint as well. You can isolate a system, you can kill processes, remediate and delete malicious files and things of that nature. But at this point, we have now added the permissions. Now we could add a user specific to this group, but remember we're allowing the roles to control those functions inside of the environment. So at this point, I'm simply going to click Add. Okay. And we now have an enterprise group assigned to this. A sure sign to know that your permissions have taken is if you expand a group, you see this little expansion icon. If you click on that and you have a full listing of capability under that agent, that means that your roles and permissions are configured correctly for your user. If you are unable to expand an agent, or if you have a very limited subset of what you see here, then that means that there's something off in the way that you constructed your user roles and permissions. So this is a very simple process. An agent can be assigned to multiple groups at the same time. So I'm going to add a group here that's going to be a Windows OS. And it would help if I could type. We're going to assign agents here that are only from an operating system. I'm going to filter out just the Windows pieces here. So you can see how this is very helpful in large environments if you want to organize based on geographic location, et cetera, this does give you that permission. And you notice that I clicked out of this before I assigned those user roles and permissions. So it's very simple to correct that. You simply right-click, edit, come back in here, and we're going to add those roles again. And we're going to add the same permission levels. And we're going to save that. So in the last 15 minutes, we have created a user, we've created a role, we've created groups, and we've assigned permissions to those users, roles, and groups. If you take this approach, it's a very straightforward process. As you change things at the top level, those permission inheritances will automatically be propagated down into those groups. This has been Cotton. It's been a pleasure today. We look forward to seeing you on other videos. If you have any questions, or if you have a desire for a more in-depth demo or training, please visit our website, www.cyfir.com.